A man can be himself only, so long as he is alone. If he loves, he ceases to be what he is. Arthur Schopenhauer, there comes a moment, a silent soul-splitting moment in every man's life when the illusions begin to crack. He looks at the very things he once chased with blind devotion, love, companionship. The dream of a future shared with someone who whispers promises of understanding. But what if all of it was a lie? Arthur Schopenhauer didn't just question it. He dismantled it. This was a man who peered into the dark machinery of human desire and refused to look away to him. Romance was not salvation. It was seduction by nature itself, a trap, a beautifully wrapped prison, what the world celebrates as love. He called delusion. What most hail as intimacy, he revealed as biology dressed in the robes of fantasy, and what you think is connection. He saw it for what it truly is, suffering in disguise. To Schopenhauer, the fundamental difference between man and woman was not just physical, it was metaphysical. Man strives for ideals, ideas, philosophies, and creation. Woman, he said, cleaves to the immediate, the practical, the survivalist instinct. In his words, women remain children their whole lives. They never see anything except what is closest to them. Cleave to the present moment. Take the appearance of a thing for reality. For him, this was not an insult, but an observation, a lens into the mind of nature itself. And what then is beauty? According to Schopenhauer, it is a mask, nothing more, a biological bait designed to seduce, to disarm, and ultimately to capture the mind of man. He believed a woman's beauty was not a gift to the world, but a trap meant to weaken a man's judgment, to pull him from his pursuits and reduce him to a servant of his own urges. And it works time and again. Men, builders of empires, shapers of history, warriors of principle, have fallen not to armies, not to ideas, but to the soft voice and gentle touch of a woman they could never truly understand. Schopenhauer argued that women lacking the power to impose force or shape grand ideas instead mastered the art of subtlety. Their power was quiet but effective, an influence not over the battlefield, but over the bedroom, the household, and the very desires of men. Where men built the world, women shaped the men who built it. Through charm, through emotion, through need, and yet society romanticizes this, calls it love, pretends it is sacred. But to Schopenhauer it was a transaction, dressed in poetry, a biological imperative cloaked in sacred vows. Love, he wrote, is not what it appears to be. It is not the meeting of souls or the destiny of hearts. It is a trick, the will to life. He called it acting blindly through us to continue the species, and it does not care about your peace of mind, your personal happiness, or your ambitions. It only cares that you reproduce, and to achieve that, it whispers fantasies into your heart and shows you illusions through your eyes. It tells you which is different. It convinces you that this time it's real, and by the time you see the truth, you've already surrendered. Schopenhauer saw marriage not as a sacred bond, but as the final act in a man's downfall, a legally binding illusion, a contract signed with hope but paid in regret. He believed that once a man succumbed to the spell of beauty and promise, he was no longer free. Marriage was not about love. It was a biological strategy of nature to ensure reproduction, and the man blinded by emotion was reduced to a beast of burden. He works, he sacrifices, he bends his will not for glory or meaning, but to sustain a structure that often leaves him empty, drained, and chained. And when the beauty fades, when the enchantment wears off, what remains? Often resentment, silence, acquired disillusionment, the very freedom he once possessed. The freedom to think, to build, to roam the world in search of truth is replaced with duty, responsibility, and routine. Schopenhauer wrote, "Marriage is a trap set by nature. The will to live wrapped in illusion, and the beta woman's smile, her softness, the promise of connection. But beneath it, all he argued is instinct, survival, repetition. This isn't hatred, this is warning. He viewed women not as villains, but as unconscious agents of nature's design. Their aim is not personal malice. It is fulfillment of their biological imperative to seek security, to ensure their own survival and the survival of their offspring. And to do so, Schopenhauer claimed, women developed a superior skill set in emotional influence, not logic, not strength, but persuasion, cunning, intuition. And it's in this space, this emotional battlefield, where so many men lose, not because they are weaker, but because they are unaware. They fight with logic in a realm ruled by instinct. They reason where they should resist. Schopenhauer saw that in this arrangement, men often become pawns. They build the house, but it is no longer theirs. They strive in their careers only to hand over the fruits they dream. But their dreams become diluted by the weight of obligation, and all the while they convince themselves this is fulfillment, that the sacrifice is noble, even necessary. But beneath it, many feel the gnawing ache of something lost, a voice they no longer hear, a fire that no longer burns, a version of themselves buried under layers of compromise. He warned of this fate, not to condemn women, but to awaken men, to open their eyes to the forces at play, to see through the veil before it's too late. He spoke to men not as enemies of women, but as seekers of truth. Because in Schopenhauer philosophy, it is not woman that destroys man. It is man's ignorance of woman, his romanticized delusions, his failure to understand what drives the dance of attraction and what it often costs him. The tragedy, then, is not that men love, it is that they love blindly, that they give their soul to an idea they never questioned, that they confuse desire for destiny and seduction for sincerity. And when the illusion finally fades, when reality sets in, they are left with more than broken hearts. They are left with broken lives. Schopenhauer's brilliance lay not in his bitterness, but in his clarity. He stripped away sentiment and exposed the machinery beneath the raw, unfiltered forces of nature that drive us all, whether we see them or not. He saw men not as oppressors, but as victims of their own longing. Men, he argued, are noble by nature, rational, driven builders of thought and civilization. They erect empires, paint masterpieces, solve the riddles of science, and wrestle with the great philosophical questions. But all of it, every achievement, every ounce of progress, is vulnerable to collapse the moment a man surrenders to unchecked desire. Because once a man falls under the spell, he begins to serve not his purpose but hers. He becomes willing to sacrifice his mission for the approval of one person. He begins to compromise his values for comfort. He reshapes his identity to be more palatable, more agreeable, more desirable. In doing so, he forgets who he is, and Schopenhauer saw this as the most tragic betrayal, not of society, not of principle, but of the self. What is the worth of a man who forgets himself? What happens to his spirit when he no longer lives for truth, but for validation? Schopenhauer observed that many men are not broken by hardship or war or poverty, but by love, or rather by the illusion of it, by the soft poison of dependency. And it is here, he argued, that women, consciously or not, hold power because they do not need to dominate with force. They dominate through need, through presence, through charm, through silence. They rarely demand obedience. Men offer it, and they rarely ask for sacrifice. Men volunteer it, and so begins the slow erosion. First, it is the time he once gave to his ambitions. Then it is the fire that once burned for his craft. Then it is the solitude that once gave birth to ideas. One by one, these pillars fall until the man who once stood tall is now kneeling, not in reverence, but in resignation. His purpose becomes maintenance. His joy becomes avoidance. His dreams shrink to accommodate someone else's comfort. And yet the world celebrates this. They call it maturity, responsibility, even love. But Schopenhauer challenged us to question, what if it's not growth but surrender? What if the man who gives up his fire isn't evolving but fading? He believed the truly awakened man sees beyond these illusions. He doesn't hate women, he understands their nature. He doesn't reject love but sees it as what it is, a force to be respected, not worshipped. And most importantly, he protects his soul from being consumed by the things that once promised happiness but only brought distraction. This is not a call to isolation but to awareness, to step back and ask, am I the man I was meant to be, or have I become someone else for the sake of peace, attention, or fleeting pleasure? Schopenhauer's voice is not one of anger. It is one of warning, a quiet but unrelenting truth echoing through the generations, calling men back to themselves before it's too late. In Schopenhauer's world, the highest form of man is not the lover, the husband, or even the warrior. It is the philosophy, her, the one who sees the game for what it is and chooses not to play. The one who turns away from the noise, from the seduction, from the applause of others, and instead faces the silence within. He believed that only through detachment could a man be free. Only by renouncing the illusion of fulfillment through others could he begin to understand his true nature. He pointed to the great men of solitude, Buddha, the Stoics, the saints and sages who walked alone, not because they were unloved, but because they were unwilling to trade their peace for momentary affection. They saw through the mirage of romantic salvation. They chose wisdom over warmth, clarity over comfort, and it was in that solitude Schopenhauer argued that man finds power, not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that reclaims the self. This path is not for everyone. Most will reject it. Society will call it cold, detached, even bitter. But Schopenhauer didn't write for the masses, he wrote for the few. The men who are ready to see, the men who have suffered enough to ask why, the ones who have chased love, lost themselves, and now seek something real. Not validation, not comfort, but truth. And the truth is this: a man who does not understand his desires is ruled by them. A man who does not understand women is vulnerable to them, and a man who builds his identity on the promises of romance will watch that identity collapse when those promises are broken. Schopenhauer challenges every man to ask, are you awake or are you dreaming someone else's dream? This is not a rejection of love. It's a call to love differently, to love your mind, to love your purpose, to love the stillness that speaks when the world goes quiet. Because the man who can sit alone with his thoughts and feel no hunger, no longing, no ache for something more, that is the man who cannot be controlled. That is the man who is truly free. So if you're watching this and something inside you stirs, if something feels painfully, uncomfortably true, don't run from it. Sit with it. Let it burn away the illusions you've been clinging to. Let it strip you of the lies you were told about who you need to be and what will make you whole. You were never meant to live in chains disguised as comfort. You were never meant to die in a life built on compromise. You were meant to see clearly, to walk alone if you must, to rise not because someone told you to, but because you remembered who you are. Let Schopenhauer as brutal truth be the mirror, not so you can hate the world, but so you can stop being deceived by it, and once you see clearly, you never unsee. If this message opened your eyes, share it, like, subscribe, and let other men hear what they were never told. Because the truth will set you free, but first it will shatter everything you thought you knew. If this video stirred something in you, if it challenged the way you think or made you see the world just a little clearer, Don't let it end here. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear the truth, and subscribe for more content that speaks to the mind, not just the moment. And if you believe in this message and want to support the mission, consider joining the channel membership or checking the support link in the description. Your support helps keep these conversations alive and spreading.